I have two daughters, and so there's certainly been a lot of struggles there in terms of, on the one hand, there are these 42,000 kids that need my care and my attention, and often the problems that they're facing are much greater than the problems that my kids are facing at home.
Subscribe to the channel to watch more such videos.
Hello ma'am, how are you?
Hi, good. Nice to meet you.
Welcome to FI Storytellers, and I've read about your initiative Teach for India. I've read about how you've been to other countries and then you came back to serve these children in slums. I want to know how it all began. When did the idea of teaching kids in slum incepted in your mind? How did it all start?
Yeah. So my story actually started many years ago. It's 26, 27 years now since I first walked into a community in Mumbai and started teaching. And I think many things in my life led up to that moment. But I think at the time it was really just one of those passing instincts. I was in a taxi, very crowded Mumbai day, very hot day. A few kids ran up to the window, and I was studying at the time at Tufts University in the US, and I looked out of the window at the kids and sort of questioned why I was going back to the US, and thought that whatever I could do in India could perhaps be more useful than going back to college in the US. So I dropped out of college in the US.
So I think you were really young. You were only 18 at that time.
Yeah.
So what made you start that?
Could perhaps be more important than going back to university in the US. And so that's really what happened. I stayed in India. I got myself enrolled into Xavier's College. That's another story of its own of how that happened. And then I walked into a community and started teaching. And I think that
I think your first center started then only.
Yeah. So I started the first Akanksha center a few months after I moved back to India, and it wasn't even a formal organization or a formal center. It was just bringing a small group of children to a school every day to really give them a space to be children, to have fun, to do a little bit of art, a little bit of learning, and that's really how it all began.
Why did you name it Akansha?
So really at that time, like, we were all volunteers for the first 4 years, and so everything we did was asking for a favor. So similarly, when we needed a name, we sort of asked around in college and we said, like, does anyone have suggestions of a name? And one of my friends had a sister who was a graphic designer who said, I don't mind thinking about a name and a logo. And so everyone literally put all these names into a bag, and we pulled names out, and this name resonated a lot because Akanksha means aspiration. I think the initial idea that came for the logo was the image of the rising sun. So the idea of brightness, of light, which has actually stayed very constant through the years for us.
Okay. So what were the initial struggles you faced when you started this?
So I think initially a lot of the struggles that you would guess. So where do you get money from? Yeah, where do you get money from? How do you register? At that time, the process of registering as a trust was even more complicated. So like numerous trips back and forth to the charity commissioner. Every time there would be one form missing or one bit of information that they needed. How do you mobilize people? So we were all volunteers. We didn't have funds to bring in staff for the first 4 years. So how do you actually go out there and motivate people to come in and prioritize this over all the other things in their life? So finding people. And then the most complex challenges, which were with the children themselves. So the fact that we were young, we weren't teachers, we didn't know how to teach. We certainly were not equipped for some of the problems that came up, whether it was kids getting abused or their homes being demolished in the communities. Responding to all of those things was very emotionally draining, I think, for us.
Were there problems because you were too young? Because were people taking you seriously because of your age?
I think that, there was a little bit of that as well. I think there was the age. When we started out, our kids were aged 3 to 15. So some of the kids were just a few years younger than all of us. So I think that was certainly one of the concerns. The other one for me was just the lack of context. I'd never lived in India before since I was a year old. So language was a barrier, context was a barrier. But in a way, those also became equalizing factors. So when I would go into a community, I would teach a little bit of English, but they would teach a little bit of Hindi. My age was both a barrier, but also a huge a way to connect with children to understand what what was going on in their lives. So I think, like with anything, the opportunities and challenges are two sides of the same coin.
Were there challenges within the family? I mean, they were okay you dropping out and joining a cause in Mumbai?
So I think, obviously family is concerned, especially when Tufts University was a good college at that time. It had taken me a lot of effort to get into the college. So there were certainly conversations about, is this the best decision to take, and does it make sense to finish college here and then go back? You have a lot of time afterwards. But at the same time, I think my parents have never directly said no. Like they've given me their opinion, and I think in their opinion it was wiser to stay in college and finish and maybe work for a few years and then come back. But at the same time, I think they saw that this was something I really wanted to do. So once I took the decision, they did support the decision.
And what about your friend's girl who were in the college at that time?
I think people just didn't understand. They thought it was a little bit crazy. At that time also, like today, there are a lot more people moving back from the US and other countries to India to do similar things. At that time, it was very rare. So people were all trying to go the other way. They were trying to go from India over there. So
absolutely, and I can imagine back then, 25, 26 years back, when you were planning to come back from US.
Yeah.
So it's a big thing.
Yeah. So people did think it was a little bit crazy.
So did you like the crazy part of it, or were you really passionate to be here and do stuff?
I think from a very early age, any kind of unfairness has bothered me a lot. And I think growing up very blessed with a lot in my own life, I always was very, very conscious of the fact that I had a different type of opportunity than many other kids. So the coming back to India was the single motivation was really like, I just have to be able to give a little bit of the opportunities that I've got to other kids. The fact that it sounded crazy to people didn't bother me too much. So I've never been that bothered by what other people have said about me or thought about me. So that helped.
Does that mindset come from the diversity you have lived in? I assume that you have traveled to a lot of countries. So does that mindset come from there?
Yeah, I'm sure that helped a lot. I think growing up, I was in 10 different schools. We lived in 5 different countries. We traveled a lot. We got to visit a lot of countries as well. And so you learn to be really to adapt to many different types of people, to be flexible, to be adjusting, to be very accepting of different perspectives. So I think all of that helped a lot.
So now that you look back, you look back 25, 26 years of Akanksha now, what do you think about it? I mean, have you reached the place you wanted to reach, or you never even thought about reaching here?
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
So I think a little bit of both. I think I spent 17 years at Akanksha before I moved to teach for India. So in that 17 years, I think certainly the children really pushed my understanding of what is possible with kids. So when I was in Xavier's College in Mumbai, I never dreamt that one day we would have Akanksha kids in Xavier's, but that actually happened, I also didn't think that children would go out and stand up in their communities, be change agents, exhibit leadership. Those are all things that I think our kids moved many steps ahead of where we were. And often I think, what if my expectations had been even higher? Would the kids have actually gone much further? And I actually believe that they would have. In terms of where Akanksha is today, I think I feel very proud of where we are and the change that we've made with the children we're serving, but it's still a very small number of kids. And so the real question, and I think what drove me to Teach for India as the next sort of step in the journey, was saying, how do we really do this at scale? How do we begin to shift the system? And when I think about that collectively with Akanksha, Teach for India, collectively we're only touching about 50,000 kids directly, and beyond that through the work of our alumni, more children. But I think the real question is, how do we give an excellent education to every single child in India? And when I say an excellent education, I don't mean our current understanding of education, which is like, let me do well on my exams, to graduate well from school, to get a job, to go to college, get a job, have kids, and repeat the whole cycle. What I mean by an excellent education is most definitely my own individual potential. So I should be equipped to and clear about what I want to do in my life, but also equally important, I should be a real significant contributor to the world. And that vision is very exciting for me when I see the way that the world is today and all the problems in the world today. And I believe that what we're really working for at Akanksha, at Teach for India, is a world where children grow up equipped to making the world better. That's very, very exciting.
So I would want to know, are there any instances of your struggling phase which you remember now also?
Yeah. So I think there are, as you can imagine, like with anything, many, many struggles in the work. Some of them are organizational struggles, some of them are personal struggles of you on your journey, and some of them are the struggles of the people that you're trying to serve. For me, the most difficult struggles have been watching what our kids go through and knowing how little we can do often to respond to it. And so the stories that really stand out in my mind are the children we've lost to diseases that are, we shouldn't have lost the kids to those diseases, or accidents because our kids are less safe than kids from higher income backgrounds, or instances of kids getting married at very early ages, or instances of families taking kids back to the village before their education is complete. You feel very helpless in those situations to know how you can really give children all the opportunities and support that they need to be able to unleash their greatest potential. And I think when you see the opposite, when you see how far kids can go with an excellent education, that becomes much, much harder to reconcile. So I think those have been the biggest struggles. And then on the hope side, I think, our kids have taught me more than anything else in the world. So, and by virtue of many of the challenges and struggles that they've had, and I was talking to my team a lot recently about a kid in one of our classrooms who 3 weeks ago had to have his arm amputated. He touched an electric current and the arm needed to be amputated. But when I went to visit the child, you would think that child would be depressed and upset and be in need of serious counseling, but that child was so joyful and so grateful, and was so able to take that situation in his stride. And for me, those have been the most amazing moments of the journey, to say, how can you really, whatever life throws at you, how do you see it in the most positive way and sort of move from that place? I have 2 daughters, and so there's certainly been a lot of struggles there in terms of, on the one hand, there are these 42,000 kids that need my care and my attention, and often the problems that they're facing are much greater than the problems that my kids are facing at home. But my kids at home are my kids at home. So how does one balance and spread your time, your energy, your care amongst many things that you care about? I think those have been some of the struggles.
Any particular incident during the first 4 years which made you stronger or weaker?
The first 4 years of Teach for India?
Yeah, not Teach for India, for Akanksha, because those
the
really were the
days.
years when
Yeah.
you were facing the struggles and you were growing up as an organization.
people's mindsets needed to change. So for example, one day we were teaching in a school, and the school principal gave us 1 day's notice and said, from tomorrow you can't use the school. And when I went and I asked her why, she said, no, there have been complaints from the parents that your children come from the fishing village and they smell bad, and then in the afternoons the desks are smelling and your kids wear glass bangles and those glass bangles are scratching the... and I just thought about that, and I'm like, in today's day and age, where education certainly is not a revolutionary concept, the idea of giving everyone an education, how can schools behave like this, you know? And for me, I was like, what do I tell my kids? That tomorrow, like from tomorrow, we don't have a place to go.
And also as a human being, how can you be so insensitive?
Yeah, so I think those were the things that pushed me to realize that actually the big shifts need to be the shifts in our mind. That like, how can we shift our mindsets around things? Because if we're able to do that, we'll figure out how to do things. Like, that's secondary. But are we motivated to do things? That's the difficult thing.
So if you have a message to give to the audience, the youth who is sitting right now watching your interview, watching this video, what would that be?
I mean, there's so many things I have learned and I'm learning on this journey, but I think one of the most important, I think, for today's young people is the value of staying with something over time. I find a lot of young people today really like distracted, and so like while I'm in something, I'm thinking about the next thing that I want to do. And I believe that I learn very fast, and so I want to like jump around a lot. I think there's a lot of value in saying like, let me put my head down and take the small, steady steps over time that are going to drive real change. So a little bit of the like going slower and really mastering and becoming excellent at what you do. And I think that takes time. And so when people ask me like, what's the most valuable thing you've done? I often say, I think the most valuable thing I've done is just stayed the path, because the path, as you've seen even in this conversation, has been up and down, and as all paths will be. But I think when you stay on it long enough, you really get an understanding of some things, and that's where real contribution comes from. So I would say like, think a little bit less about yourself, think about more about like, what do you want to shift in the world, and then commit to that and stick with that.
On that note,
thank
thanks
you.
a lot for coming on
Yeah,
Storytellers,
thank you.
and we hope that we meet you soon again with more such stories,
Thank
more such
you.
success stories.
Thank
Thanks a
you
lot.
so much. Bye bye. Thank
Good
you.
day.